conference. Delighted to have you here. My name is Bartha. I'm the director of Epicenter, which is a network of free market think tanks from all across Europe. And today I'm going to be your host for the next hour. And it's going to be an intense back and forth with our panelists with loads of challenging economic questions. But given that we have very much an expert audience ourselves, I'm very reliant on your input. So for at least half an hour, I would like you to challenge our panelists, ask questions, and express your opinions on what they are about to say when it comes to the economic challenges of Europe. But first, let me introduce each of our experts here today. Very welcome to Elmars Kehris, who is a Latvian economist. Elmars serves as the executive director of the Latvian Economists Association and is the CEO of a consulting firm, Kehris Consultancy. Also delighted to have my friend Lorenzo Montanari here. Lorenzo is the vice president of international affairs at the Americans for Tax Reform. And he is based in DC, but originally from Italy. So I'm sure he's going to be very happy to express his thoughts on the upcoming Italian election. Jumping a bit further to the east, I'm very happy to introduce Neven Vidakovic to you, who's a Slovenian academic and investor. He is a trader with a lot of international trading experience and serves currently as the CEO of Lotti Trading, which is a financial consultancy firm. And last but not least, very happy to have José Ramón Riera amongst us, who is a Spanish economist and businessman and will be talking a lot about the upcoming challenges before the Spanish election. It's great to have you here, gentlemen. Thanks a lot for joining. I will kickstart with a difficult question, because as you all know, the countries of Europe have implemented a lot of anti-market reforms in recent years. And just to list a few, there has been an introduction of a government-set price of energy in 2014. There has been an introduction of a price cap for chicken, pork leg, milk, flour, cooking oil, diesel, and fuel. There has been the nationalization of half the banking sector of an EU member state, the nationalization of Vodafone, which is one of the largest telecom companies, the de facto ban on certain type of energy production, including onshore wind and nuclear. There is a ban on Sunday trading. There is a notion of agricultural self-reliance, or the necessity of thereof. There have been tax rises on micro-entrepreneurs during the worst cost of living crisis. And there has been various sectoral taxation introduced last minute in the telecom, banking, and aviation sectors. And I'm not listing policies from a far-left government. I'm listing policies of 3 EU member states with conservative governments. So if these policies are the policies of conservatives in Europe right now, is conservatism really going down the route of left-wing economics? Is conservatism still compatible with free markets and market-oriented mechanisms, or have we lost the battle on that front? I would be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Lorenzo, would you like to kick us off?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. Very interesting question, because in fact, and it's also scary in the way we are facing the reality from the center-right point of view. Conservative should be tied to free market principle. Yes, of course. The real question is why center-right governments are not implementing or moving forward on free market reform. And my answer, without entering in details, but is a lack of political education. The human capital behind each political party is very weak. We have emotional leadership, what we don't have anymore into the bracket, ideological leadership. So this is very difficult to lead on economic reform. And as you said, this is something that the list you mentioned before is reform that is being implemented or proposed by center-right government. And this is maybe we should ask ourselves, what should we do as a think tank to interact, educate more, and propose public policy reform to politicians. I don't know if they stopped listening to us or we maybe made a mistake in not communicating our proposal. But I think the core issue is this. There is a lack of ideological approach to public policy.
How do we improve on that, José? You're going to have elections upcoming in Spain soon, so it's not the right wing that's in force in Spain yet, but how do we make sure if the right gets into power that they're going to implement market-friendly policies?
First of all, I want to thank New Direction to be here. And now directly to the answer that you put over the table. The answer is the conservative has to say clearly no, no, no to this type of policy that European manager, the European Commission is trying to implement. The answer must be clearly no. We don't accept to fix prices because the experience that we have in the world with Argentina, with all of the other countries, is the inflation is going to grow. We are going to create a parallel market. We have to define a clear position on in all of the different steps that we have on the energy, on the products. But freedom is mandatory for all of the conservatives if we want to win the power. If not, if we don't put clearly to the people that we say no clearly to these things, we will have a problem on the elections. And we need to win because we are the only challenge that we have to change Europe.
Neven, it's a right-wing conservative political party, HDZ, in power in Croatia. What is your opinion? Have they implemented enough free market reforms in recent years? Or if not, what can us free marketeers do in order to improve that track record?
I think that if you want to analyze something, you need to not look at one data point. You don't even have to look at a data series. You have to look at multiple data series. So let's look at multiple data series. When I came back from the States, I started working in something called asset and liabilities management, which is a highly sophisticated part of banking. And my whole job, had 700 pages of regulation. And I knew that. By the time I left banking, when Basel III was implemented, my job had 7,000 pages of regulation. That's a macro thing, so that came from Europe. Let's do micro thing. Croatian governments have consistently supported cheap imports and destruction of domestic production. This has led for 3 sugar factories, 2 of them to close, only 1 remained, and for sugarcane production to completely disappear. So now, last month, we had a fixed price on sugar which will make the remaining sugar factory go out of business. So if you take that on a macro European level, you take that on a micro national level, you clearly see a pattern. More regulation, more destruction of free enterprise, less freedom, and then you have a feedback loop which functions like this. Oh, we have a problem, but we cannot solve it as a nation. We need a European action. Okay, these nations are asking for us for a European action. European Commission needs to have more power. Well, we can gain more power through more regulation. But the previous regulation hasn't worked, so we need to introduce more regulation and more control. So if you really take the time series to a limit, you're basically moving to central planning economy. Now, just in one sentence, please. I asked Robert once, how come in European Commission there's all these people, like 50,000 people working? Well, how come you don't have diversity of opinion? How come you don't have, different proposals? And they said, because they're all clones. They're all the same. They have the same background, same education, same attitude. So it doesn't matter what your political views are in European Commission because they're all clones. And if you start reading the leftist papers, which you should always do, you already agree with the right papers, you will see that the conservatives and these groups, like people from Poland, in Croatia, are always painted as neo-Nazis. And we have had multiple titles of newspaper titles of saying that the next Italian government are fascists. So conservatives are being painted not as people who want freedom, not as people that want jobs, not as people that promote liberty, but as the most evil segment of society and of the economy. So being painted in the media like that, and on top of that, you have the Central Planning European Commission. We all know how that's gonna end. I mean, it's been tried before, always ended the same way.
It's a tricky question because we are obviously all influenced by EU regulations, but the Baltics have far outperformed almost all of Europe when it comes to economic growth. So what's different in the Baltics, Elmars? What do you think? Why is it the case that more political parties, including conservative parties and liberal parties and even social democratic parties, have accepted that market reforms are necessary? What can we learn from you guys?
Yeah, thank you. Quite interesting question. No, the main, I think, why we have worked quite good on policies and everything, because we went out from the Soviet economy, and we actually put in place free market economy model only in the 1990s. So we started working with good principles, but now we can actually see that it's, from European Union, it's going back about the whole. As you mentioned before, there are even conservative governments who like to put on some protective policies and go on anti-free market. Usually, it's in the case that the government doesn't have a strategical plan in their mind, so they only they want to do something, they don't know how to do something, and they're going on the easy, cheap way, putting on some policies, regulations, and they're not focusing on economic growth. And that's the key point where Baltic states go in. Okay, each of our countries have different problems, but we are focusing on economic growth, not on policies, regulations, a lot of cultural aspects. We don't have a woke culture still in Latvia. We focus on mainly how actually we can grow. That's the main target.
So by focusing on economic growth, Lorenzo, there are upcoming elections on Sunday in Italy. If you had to advise the most likely new conservative right-leaning government, what would be the 2-3 key policies that you would advise them in order to spur economic growth?
Well, definitely one of the things that in this election there is no debate is how to reform the public spending. And this is pretty sad because even the center-right leader, they don't have a gut or the balls to speak about how to reform because they are very afraid to lose vote, especially in some low income area, like in the south of Italy. So this is the first thing. Because if you don't implement a tax reform, implementing public spending cut, you cannot implement a tax reform, a consistent tax reform. There is a debate in this current election. The narrative of this election is implementing flat tax, but the three main center-right party, someone is more right-wing, someone is more center, they don't have an idea what should be the percentage of flat tax and if it should be implemented to all the economic sector. So far, the debate is only to have a flat tax up to 100 on income, or up to 100,000. I disagree. We should implement flat tax for all sector, private and individuals. The third point is nobody speak about how to deregulate the Italian economy. So without these 3 points,
is the last one possible as an EU member state? I mean, most of the regulations come from the European Commission.
They should start at least at the regional level. There is a room for improvement, also according to the European Union and also our constitution. But the problem that is difficult. Nobody has a clear idea how to reform the bureaucracy. And these are the 3 main points that basically center-right, they don't have any vision, or they have a partial vision. So I'm happy that the center-right will win. Let's see in which way it will win and how they will be able to implement, maybe not the first year, because we are in the middle of the energy crisis, maybe in the second year. So we will win. they will win, but I think we're going to lose again an opportunity to reform Italy because of these three main points that are not part of the main narrative.
That's not very encouraging to hear, because then what's the point of conservatives being in power if they're not implementing the conservative free market reforms? Talking about power and uncontrollable power, a lot of us in Brussels do care about the European Parliament and Commission, but what's often not seen is the work of the European Central Bank. But obviously, with the current cost of living crisis and double-digit inflation all across Europe, the role of ECB kind of became more in the public domain. If you had to search and assign blame for the current cost of living crisis and spiraling inflation, how would you kind of divide that between national governments, the ECB, and the geopolitics of the world, so the Russian aggression and the war? José.
Okay, so very good question, and very difficult at the same time to answer. But let me put you in the environment. Okay, July 21st, the inflation was 2.2 at the European level. Okay, at this moment, the ECB has a mandatory actuation, because when the ECB was created in 1998, has two roles to do. First, attack the inflation. Second, defend the new coin, the euro that is going to appear in a couple of years later. These are the two jobs that the ECB has to do: control the inflation and defend the euro. July 21st, with 2.2, starts to see that the inflation moves over the 2%. The ECB decided to say, okay, it's not the right time to attack the inflation, and we are not going to attack until we arrive to the 4%. Okay, the 4% arrives at the end of September. Starting October, Europe has 4%. And ECB doesn't do any type of things. Start to make mistakes. In March, the Fed decided to increase the interest rates because the inflation in the United States was around 8%. Europe has around 8%. Europe, we have arrived at 9.8% of inflation rate in July. And that is when ECB decided to attack the problem. Lagarde has made so many mistakes, so many
Too
mistakes.
little, too late?
Too late. It's 1 year late. According with their mandatory, so you have to attack immediately that you arrive at 2%. 2.2 is over 2. In July, he has to attack the inflation, and she decided not to do. And the team that they have in their table decided not to say we are against Lagarde. First. Second, the countries have responsibility, of course, because, for instance, in Spain, the government, instead of decided to move taxes, to decrease taxes, increases taxes in order that get more money for their expenses, and that makes more difficulty to attack the inflation. Europe has a problem with the ECB. First of all, has to change the top management. And second, has to attack, like the Fed is doing at this time, the 3.25% interest rate is the only way to cut as soon as possible the inflation. Inflation is a big problem, mainly for the people that has less money in their pockets.
Sure. Neven, putting your financial expert hat on, what would be your solution to José's problems that he has outlined? So José outlined that the Fed acted a lot quicker than the ECB did, and looks like the USA will manage to curb inflation a lot quicker than we in Europe. So if you see these mistakes made by Christine Lagarde and the ECB, how do financial markets react, and what is the solution from a central banker's perspective? The mistakes already happened, so going forward.
Well, I don't have a hat. In Croatia, I'm actually known as the economist with a crystal ball. Everything Jose said has been dead on. It's the timeline. That's the problem. I will give you that July was maybe, she could have let it pass. But in October, when she said we've done a lot of soul searching and that inflation's gonna decrease, that was basically an invitation for every single hedge fund manager to pillage and ravage Europe. How do you handle this? First of all, you need to know what's going on and who's your enemy. What is going on is that not that the dollar is getting stronger, it is that euro is getting weaker. People are just running away. In case you haven't checked the exchange rate and doing something else, euro is at 97 with the dollar. By the end of next month, I mean, everything's open. 90, 85. So that's a problem. European companies are having growth of earnings of 26% year over year, and the stock market's going down. Why? Because what we talked about, policies, well, they're just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse, so everyone is running away from Europe. Now, this is exceptionally fertile ground for predatory hedge funds, which is basically what I'm doing. Like this entire year, all I've been doing is shorting European bonds. So now that you know what's going on and who your enemy is, you basically need to go on the offensive. You need to reestablish credibility, you need to reverse policies, and you need to coordinate fiscal and monetary policies together, which basically says we're going to defend the economy of Europe.
So what does that mean practically?
Practically, here's how you do it. First of all, you have to raise interest rates. And you have to raise interest rates that they are anti-inflationary. If you look at the, for example, German 10-year or Italian 10-year, they went up 3.5%, while the ECB increased rates by 1.25. If you look at US, Fed increased interest rates is going to increase interest rates by 4%, while the 10-year only went up 2%. So you need to have anti-inflationary credibility. On the flip side, you need to this is going to be bad for the economy. It's going to be bad for the banks that have fixed interest rate loans. You need to support the economy through fiscal policies. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean deficit, but it means prioritize spending. So you have to support small and medium enterprises, which give the strength to the European economy through all sorts of various programs, tax cuts, whatever, and then you need to decrease wasteful government spending, which is basically how much you have bureaucracy. Why, for example, Croatia has 600 territorial units, where every territorial unit has a mayor who gets a large salary. So you decrease wasteful government and you reroute spending to support small and medium enterprises with restrictive restrictive monetary policy, overall credibility, and it's going to be bad, but you're going to weather it out.
A lot of politically very, very difficult things to do, but economically very necessary.
You asked for a practical solution. You didn't ask for a practical implementation.
That's going to be the role of politicians around the table. Switching a bit to geopolitics, obviously the Baltics are super small but very open, prospering economies. The Russian conflict to the east is going to have a massive impact in kind of investor confidence and investment into these countries. What do you think small open economies in Europe can do in order to spur economic growth and make sure that even during very problematic geopolitical tensions, it's possible to implement free market reforms? So, for example, what I often hear in Brussels is that, okay, if we want to fight China, we need to become more like China, right? We need to have an industrial policy, we need to be protectionistic in certain economic sectors. So, in order to beat China, let's become more like China. This is not the attitude what most Baltic countries have taken. So, what is your suggestion on a European level and not just on a Baltic level for spurring economic growth and ensuring that even during geopolitically problematic times, we have sufficient liberalizing reforms?
Okay. The first thing, energy. If Europe is importing 60% of the energy resources, no, we don't need another world conflict. No, this crisis would happen eventually. No. Russian money has been coming in even in Baltic countries, the Lithuanian nuclear facility was shut down by lobbyists with Putin's money. The same in Germany, and that's actually quite risky. Because energy sector, it's logical. A lot of people don't understand the financial sector because there are multiple things, but energy sector is purely logical, and if you can really pay a lot of people for the size, for example, Germany, a huge economy, and it's basically just working all their principles only on what's good for Russian gas companies. So that's very terrifying. So
Solving
Europe,
energy crisis.
yeah,
Number one.
No, we need nuclear power plants. A lot of nuclear power plants. In Germany, in Poland, in Latvia, Estonians are building those small modular models. Latvia will, I think, eventually do the same. We're doing the research, and actually our think tank is, together with the ECR party, we're making a report on energy sector. What's the future of European energy, and what are the transitional challenges for the Latvian sector? So it will. In Latvian it will be faster than in English. So, but in a 3 weeks time you can all hopefully see that report. So it's quite interesting, and it will provide a lot of solutions on what are the future scenarios if you want renewables and nuclear, who are the best options. So the first, we have to solve energy. We have to become energy independent. That's the first thing. The second thing, we cannot influence the central bank as much as we would want. We have 21% inflation. Estonians have the same. Lithuanians have 24%, and that's crazy. Those numbers are unsustainable. The recession will come, and it will come hard. And what the European Central Bank does, they increased interest rates to historical 0.75%. We need 10. We need the 10% to tackle the inflation. But basically, the central bank is just monitoring, a lot of companies, especially the zombie companies, all the financial, banks from which were hit hard with the financial crisis, they will go under if the inflation rate will go up, till 3 or 4%. But we need 10. So this will cause a huge shocks, for next years to come, and the European euro stability will be a challenge at least for the next years, because debt is high, inflation is high, stability is low. The central bank, it's a strange mechanism. We have multiple fiscal policies, one monetary policy in the euro area, but the central bank has to do the ABC of what central banks have to do. Don't put too much money into the economy. And with the whole COVID money, it's crazy, because we can see that 20% inflation, a lot of it is caused by energy and food, but 9% of it's going into spiral. Salaries are increasing, and it will go up, and if the interest rates will not go up, we will be hit hard. The Baltic states will be hit hard.
José, quick
Yes,
question.
I want to say you are totally correct. The ECB, the European Commission decided, due to the COVID, to make a debt for the countries accept 2 billion euros. 2 billion euros in 2 years. How the money arrives to the countries? Because they create debt, sell to the ECB, and the ECB gives money to the countries. 2 billion euros in 2 years is the reason what we have arrived, one of the reasons that we have arrived to this type of situation, because it's not possible to have 8 billion euros more than 10 years ago at the market, only with a machine, printing machine, plus around 10 billion US dollars printing by the Fed. There are close to 20 billion dollars at the market that makes this inflation. And you have to attack immediately to avoid that countries like yours arrive to the 20% of inflation. You have to attack immediately. If you don't attack, 20%, Spain 10.5%, and the Baltics are all over the 20s.
It's definitely a worrying spiral, and the role of ECB is unquestionable in that. In a second, I would like to throw it to the audience. We have touched on many, many different topics, so I'm sure you have some challenges, opinions, and questions to our panelists. But first, Lorenzo, I would like to touch upon rule of law and property rights issues, because I know that ATR and the Property Rights Alliance work on an annual index that measures how property rights develop throughout the world. And whilst Europe or some European countries are performing very well, others are in the second half of the index. So, Hungary, Poland, Greece, and Bulgaria are not performing too well. What do you think the role is what do you think rule of law means when it comes to economic rights and to prospering economies? So what's your experience? Why is there such a divergence between EU member states when it comes to property rights?
Thank you for the question. I take the opportunity to say we recently published the new edition of the International Property Rights Index, September the 7th. This index analyzes three macro areas: the legal political environment, physical property right, intellectual property rights. And following your question, the first component of this index, the legal political environment, is the most important thing to understand the health of each country. Because in this segment, we analyze judicial independence, rule of law, political corruption, political stability. And we collect data. We don't produce data, so we are just to avoid to be biased. So we collect data from OECD, World Economic Forum, World Bank, IMF. And what's happened? We see that usually the Northern European country and Singapore is the only Asia with Japan are the best performing country. Going south, including Italy, for example, that is out of 129 countries, positioned in 45. And going back to Hungary, Poland, and Greece, we see that the major lack of performance, let's put it in this way. We don't want to criticize anyone, but we realize that one of the weak points of this common country is the judicial independence. So we see, for example, that in Hungary, that is a position in 52 out of 129 countries, the judicial independence is at 3.3. Same for Poland. Poland actually is at 2.7. Bulgaria is at 3.8. Greece is a little bit better in judicial independence at 4.1. But what is affecting the score of these countries is the first component. They are not performing pretty well in terms of intellectual property right, a little bit better on physical. Saying that, we need to say also that since 2018, we see a setback of property right protection all over the world. Even Finland is number one in almost every year.
What's the main cause of that?
Is because the implementation of, let's say, regulatory, corruption, and also in the last year with COVID and all the crisis, we see that also judicial independence, rule of law are losing, let's say, appealing in even center-right or center-left government. So I'm saying that because even if government will be implemented or vote the best IP protection law, IP physical property right, without the strong legal political environment, you cannot implement and defend. So there will be a direct consequence on affecting foreign direct investment if you don't have a strong judicial independence, In our index, all the data are available, so I'm happy to share with you if you want to analyze your country or segment of your country. But there is a correlation between the lack of rule of law with our index and the corruption index, illicit trade index, innovation index. So property, the bottom line we show with different graphics that bottom line is protecting property right as a holistic system will have economic growth. The top 20% of the country have a GDP per capita that is 21 times bigger of the lower. So this explains the direction that politicians should implement, in which type of reform should implement. We saw, for example, sorry, I don't want to take much of your time, but another interesting debate that raised during the pandemic is the suspension of intellectual property right for COVID vaccine. is another big lie, because IP is not affecting the COVID vaccine. Actually, it's the opposite. What is affecting the distribution is the lack of logistic, and more than 650 trade barrier on the raw materials. So the IP, the suspension of IP that's been proposed by South Africa, India, and followed by Biden administration is just the old-fashioned leftist narrative against property rights.
I think it's very important that you outline the role of rule of law when it comes to economic growth, and that's very much in the realm of national governments across the EU. So definitely our think tanks and organizations promoting economic growth do need to focus on that as well. I think our panelists listed a lot of different challenges and many solutions, but I would be very curious to hear questions and thoughts from the audience as well. So if there are any, then I'm happy to throw the ball to you. Yes, sir. And please do have an introduction at the beginning.
Yes, hello. I'm Thomas Malin, and I'm an associate professor and a CEO of GNS Economics, which is a forecasting agency. And thank you for the panelists. Decent analysis, I would say. But there are two things that really I think the whole conference is stepping around them like a, well, I don't kind of think of any proper metaphor for it. But the first one was the corona lockdowns, a political decision, catastrophic. I supported the first one, and then after that we should have just cleared away from those political decisions again. And now what threatens Europe is not a recession, it's a depression, and probably permanent deindustrialization because of the political choices. Never in the history of Europe have we achieved a victory over Russia or Soviet Union under economic sanctions. It's the stupidest decision we have ever made, I think. Because the thing is that they are causing a massive havoc. They will cause a massive havoc, the sanctions and the counter-sanctions in Europe. And I would like to have the panelists' view on that. Thank you.
So back to geopolitics, what is the role of sanctions? Has the EU implemented the sanctions at the right time? And did it do justice when it comes to fighting Russia?
No, I could start because I'm on, I think, in opposition. No. We needed much stronger sanctions and in the first day. Any transaction with the Russian government had to stop. The Latvians did it, we cut off our gas, okay, it caused problems. But you can find the solutions if you're really relying it's unfriendly global power. Not Russia, it's not a smart partner, it's actually quite predictable. They're attacking countries every 4 to 6 years. The Putin has destroyed their whole opposition. No, we cannot work for a better future for our children or tackle climate crisis or everything else if we cannot, if we're supporting regimes that kills a lot of people. No, so we needed much stronger sanctions much sooner. And I think the main problem why actually Europeans hit because the Russian lobbies all across Europe, especially in the energy sector, they're just lobbying to, and that's why they have so strong ties. The European Union had to be independent in energy sector. No, we cannot, just work on Russian gas and coal for the rest of our lives. We have to become independent.
I mean, the former Chancellor of Germany works for a major Russian company. The current Hungarian foreign minister received a Medal of Friendship from Lavrov in February 2022. So certainly there are many EU leaders or former leaders who rather speak out for the Russian interest. But going back to the sanctions, does the rest of the panel agree? Did we go far enough, or was the EU too slow in implementing some of these economic sanctions? And what about the fallout? I mean, it's definitely unquestionable that energy prices went up like crazy. It's very likely that they would have done the same if Putin just stops the gas without the economic sanctions. But was the sequencing of sanctions right?
Let me give you an information in order that everybody understand which is the real situation. The Eurostat has published the trade that the commerce, international commerce that we have made with the 10 more important countries that we have relations, okay? China, we have export to China, the same amount of money on the first 6 months that we export on 21st. China has export to the European Union 3 times more than they export during the first half of the year of the 21st. Russia. We have export to Russia 30,000 million euros less. But we have bought from Russia 200,000 more euros than on the previous year. Okay, where are the sanctions? There are no sanctions of economical, because the European Union has bought to Russia 200,000 more million euros than previous year on 6 months time only. Sanctions?
I assume that's because of the value of the energy imports, right? Because of the skyrocketing prices for energy imports, which in the short term is a massive problem.
Yeah, but at the end, what we has given to the Russia is 200,000 more euros.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. There are no sanctions. At the end, it was only, as usual, the Commission, only words. Reality, it's we are not doing anything. We are not, because if not, we cannot accept to buy this amount of money from Russia. Because it's not 20, it's not 30,000, no, it's 200,000.
Neven, would you like to comment?
Yeah. Yesterday we had this discussion. I want to repeat what I said. Let me give you an alternative reality in a parallel dimension. So Russia attacks, and they invade Ukraine. And European Commission sets up a small incognito group of 5 to 10 people to analyze what is Europe's dependency on Russia. They get that feedback in a week, and they figure out how to completely eliminate that dependency within 1 year. At the same time, they impose no sanctions on Russia, but they continue feeding weapons, education, whatever is needed to Ukraine. Once Europe has gained independence from Russia, it cuts off Russia completely 100% on every single connection. So you don't have what Borrell said, that the 6th package of sanctions are going to be smart sanctions, which by definition means the first 5 were stupid. So that's an alternative reality. Let's go back to our reality. When the invasion occurred, I woke up and I was like, what? Okay, fine. I turned on the TV, and I never watch TV, and I never watch news. I just look at the data. And I listened to Croatian Prime Minister Plenković, who said, we are sending an exceptionally strong political message to Russia. And I Googled, and I wanted to find the nearest pharmacy to where I live, so I can run to that pharmacy and buy a pair of diapers for an older person and then ship it FedEx to Putin. Because I'm sure that after Putin heard Croatian Prime Minister send a really strong political message, Putin's pants were full. So you don't do it that way. So when I saw what these people, how they're behaving, I knew that I'm basically dealing with mid-level amateurs. So everything that is happening from then on, what I see happening in financial markets is that the top is both intellectually, strategically unmatched to the other side. And we had a previous panel. Funny, nobody mentioned the word ideology. And you cannot defeat China or Russia by becoming more like China and Russia. You become less, because you cannot turn into what you hate. You have to remain what you are. And these people are basically not through sanctions or whatever, but through economic policies are trying to replicate Chinese central 5-year planning in Europe. And you have a global financial market where basically you have sharks, crocodiles, alligators, and other animals like me that are going to simply tear up your economy. And that is what is going on. That's why Euro's tanking. That's why European bonds are tanking. And that's why Ursula still has a wonderful hair and still says, we are sending strong political message. So I would like to send you a strong health message in one sentence, how to be nice and beautiful. Eat less, work out more. Are you going to do it? Same thing. And it's not that funny because my life is depending on those people. That's the most horrible thought.
On this disturbing mental image of imagining Putin in diapers, are there any other questions in the audience? Yes.
Hey, I'm Melissa O'Sullivan with the Danube Institute in Budapest. Does the panel have any comment on Liz Truss's move, which on the one hand was protective in nature by talking about imposing price controls on energy, but yet removing the ban on fracking, so thereby looking at increasing long-term the total energy supply?
I'm happy to throw it to the panel, but being based in the United Kingdom, I may address the question as well. It's not a price cap on energy. It's a subsidy. Essentially, the government is topping up what's missing between the government-mandated prices and the market prices. So it's going to cost the UK government a lot of money, but essentially they are not trying to limit the inflow of gas or inflow of energy because it's not a price cap per se. I'm reasonably optimistic about the current cabinet and the Truss cabinet. I think the last 12 years of conservative government have been a massive disappointment from a free market perspective. There have been very, very little liberalizing reforms, despite the fact that the UK left the EU, so it had the opportunity to do so, yet the Johnson government did none of it. I think the Truss cabinet is going to have a very, very different attitude, at least when it comes to taxation, deregulation, and foreign policy as well. It's a proper classical liberal free market approach that is rather endearing to the ears of many of us in the room. How much they will be able to implement that with a lot of resistance from unions and with a lot of kind of political unpopularity after 12 years being in the government. 18 months is not a lot, but I hope that they're going to decide to be kind of a kamikaze government, implement as many free market reforms as possible, and then see how the elections go in 18 months. But if the panel has any further thoughts on the UK, very happy to throw the ball to you. If not, then throw the ball back to the audience. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Alexei Goncharenko, member of the Parliament of Ukraine. I just want a little bit to answer what I've heard about sanctions about Russia. And I just want to remind all of us that economics starts from security. If we don't have security, what economics can we build? And what is the proposition of you? You're saying that sanctions are bad against Russia. So what do you propose? Putin is clearly, openly says, I want to kill you. The whole West. He's not saying about Ukraine. He said in his last speech 2 days ago, this is the war against the West. So let's feed him with money. Let's give him weaponry to kill the West, all of us. Ukrainians for sure, we are already there, but others too. So let's continue. That is the answer. I mean, are we insane at all? So when I'm hearing that about 200 billion euros, we're giving more, you're absolutely right. Why Russia is still not cut off from SWIFT? What about number of other industries? Why Rosatom, which is threatening all of us by attacking Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant now, the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, third biggest in the world, is occupied for the first time in human history and is shelled by Russians. They're shelling from tanks to nuclear reactors. Does somebody here think that it will not hurt you if somebody will happen there? And where are any one sanction against Rosatom? No one at all. So We are speaking about the too much sanctions. No, they are not real sanctions. That's the problem. That's the problem. And not like you, I lived in Soviet Union. And Soviet Union collapsed, first of all, not because of military defeat, but because of economical one. That was number one. That made it impossible to run further, this country. I saw it. I was born in 1980. And I saw how it was we were standing in lines for bread. And from these everything happened when such big country couldn't even feed itself. That's all. And today one Ukraine is feeding 200 million people on the planet. And during Soviet Union, this economical socialistic model made that they can't feed themselves, ourselves at that time. So I'm quite shocked with your question. Thank you. Sorry for just comment.
I appreciate the feedback because I think it's super important to discuss what we can do in order to stop Russian aggression. That's in the interest of the whole of Europe, not just in the interest of Ukraine, of course. So in terms of sanctions, are there any suggestions from the panel that would be implementable as soon as possible and kind of elevate the pressure on our own citizens, help them in the short term to kind of weather the storm with the cost of living crisis, but would lead in a long term or medium term to derive Russia from a lot of Western money that's flowing into the country? Any clever ideas? Or is it too difficult?
Let me tell you something, because it's important to know in which situation we are from the economical point of view. The European Union at this time is in bankrupt. It's close to the bankrupt. In the last 20 years, they have produced 6.6 billion euros of debt. If today we can do less, we are not able to do more because we have no money. We cannot put the machine again because of the inflation. But the real decision that we can say to the Russia is, okay, guy, we are going to invest not 2%, not 3%, 5% of the total GDP in the NATO. All of the countries is going to put 5% of their resources to the NATO to develop a new army, a new organization, and ask the states to bring to Europe as much as army that we need. But we have to do it, but we don't have money. That's the problem. The problem is that we are in a very bad situation. The four bigger countries, France has produced a debt of 1.8 billion euros in 20 years. Italy, 1.2, Spain, 1, Germany, 0.6 billion. In total, 70% of the total debt of Europe. It means, or we cut the expenses immediately, and we put in just immediately decisions to cut the expenses, or we cannot afford the future. That's the big problem. I think
that's an important point, José, because I would like to challenge you. I think Europe is one of the richest areas of the whole globe, right? We have one of the largest economies. GDP per capita is super high in Western Europe. The East is catching up. We have a lot of economic power, but we are spending like crazy, and we are spending like crazy on the wrong priorities. So I think when we are discussing how we can help Ukraine, we need to prioritize our own security and the security of our allies and friends. And we need to say, okay, we're going to have super big spending cuts in specific sectors in order to spend more on defense and in order to be able to help allies that have been attacked by foreign powers. But this is a political choice that we are making. It's not the lack of money that's the problem. I think it's the political choices that we're making. Elmar.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing. No, if we're going to talk about sanctions, they don't work. Let's just not give them money. That's the first part. Actually, Europe has built up their gas reserves to 70–80% of each nation. Actually, if we want, we can. Germany can cut off Russian gas for the next winter and see. Let's see what happens. Because I think, it's the same like in Soviet times. It collapsed due to economic reasons. How long the Russian economy can withstand? Because the Putin government isn't cheap. He's paying for everybody. all of his daughters, the general daughters, every of them, they live in Europe. Nobody wants to live in Russia. So if we cut off their money supply, it would be interesting. But we were talking about sanctions. The sanctions are just sanctions. No, Latvia closed off everything from Russia. We depended on a lot of no products are coming in. No gas is coming in. Actually, now the border is closed. The Russians cannot get in. No. We don't need only to think about sanctions, but there are other alternatives also, especially if we're talking about security threats. There's Kaliningrad, there's Transnistria. No, we have to go farther than only sanctions. That would be my suggestion. No, because sanctions on European level, they will not work due to Germany. We have to find new ways with the partners, the UK, everybody else. We have to be a strong Western alliance and work on defensive things, and because the regime will crumble down eventually. That's what happens with authority. And actually, that will also be a big problem. Estonians have showed it quite well. If something will happen in Russia, the refugees will be coming. If St. Petersburg population goes into Finland and Estonia, Estonian population is doubled. The same problem with us. So some bad things will happen in future. We have to be prepared and not only talk about sanctions.
Sure. We're slowly running out of time, so if there is one final question from the audience, we are very happy to address it.
Can I comment?
And a short comment from the gentleman.
Well, first a small historical thing. So Finland lost 11% of her landmass when we fought the Russians or the Soviet Union. And we built a very prosperous relationship with them because we were forced to. And the other thing is, I would like to ask for all of you to think who it will benefit if Europe commits economic suicide.
I guess that was the aim of the panel, to suggest solutions not to commit economic suicide and to come up with free market solutions to grow our economies whilst keeping us secure and keeping our allies secure. So I appreciate all the feedback and all the thoughts from the panel. And thank you very much for your questions and attendance, and enjoy the lunch. Thank you.